just say you guys are insane. Okay, so while we were outside, people asked me, I thought I was being perfectly obvious, but of course I'm incoherent at this point. And they were asking me, well, what do you deduce from the fact that Watson starts in the Fusiliers and then he ends up in the Berkshires? Yeah. I mean, it's a demotion, okay, if I didn't make that clear. He started off in a not well off, but incredibly famous regiment. And they went on to have an awesome Afghan campaign, you know, and like got to the top of their league and everything. And so he's in this fantastic, and he ends up as saying the Berkshires, who become famous for getting massacred shortly after he joins in, you know? So what went on there? I attribute it to the gambling. It is canon that Holmes has possession of Watson's checkbook. Like, that's in canon. So what I'm assuming is going on is that John is playing cards at a pace, I don't think he's a very good gambler, and he's playing cards and he's losing more money than he can really afford. And the officers of his regiment are like, this is going to get ugly. And so they're like, I'll tell you what, stick him in a regiment where everyone is dead broke. And they're playing for matchsticks, and that way he's not going to, because there was no dishonor in losing money at cards. There was a tremendous amount of dishonor in not being able to pay that debt, you know? And so I think his officers, they're kind of like, there's a number of signifiers that sort of like, it's just not really working out for Watson. And I think they just kind of bump him into a different regiment, and that way he's not their problem, and it's kind of, they can, you know, they've sort of dealt with it, okay? And the other one was, why would Sebastian Moran end up in the Pioneers? I guess he's a wild child. The real question is, though, how did he get thrown out? What does he do? Is he shagging dogs? In the officers' quarters?
In daylight!
Yeah. It's a male dog. I don't know. As I say, I cannot begin to conceive. You can sort of extrapolate forwards, because in canon, we know that basically there was, I mean, you know, Holmes says he made India too hot to hold him. There was no open scandal, but he left the regiment. And his regiment's a bunch of Indian guys who were just shit out of stuff. And so I guess you can extrapolate forward. We know that at the point where Holmes meets him, he is living in London, paying his bills by cheating at cards. Murder was nothing like as serious transgression as cheating at cards for a gentleman. Seriously. Like, if you got caught in murder, you'd end up hanged. If you got caught cheating at cards, you're going to have to shoot yourself. There's just no other way out of this situation, okay? So maybe it was a cards thing. Maybe he's playing with Watson. Maybe that's why Watson's losing so much. Actually, totally different places in the country. But that's, you know, what do I think? I think John's gambling problem gets him booted from a regiment that doesn't have a lot of money, but my God, they've got pride and they've got reputation, and they're not having a bad card player as the certain that I can get out. And Moran, as I say, his father's basically good. His father has the potential to get as high up the power structure as you can be without having a monarch as parent, basically. You know, you can run India. It's not yours, but you get to manage it, you know. So like that, so but I think with Moran, I actually kind of think that it's more just, he's just wild. He just doesn't want to, you know, he's in this family that has this tremendous diplomatic, you know, cachet and everything, and he just doesn't want to do it. He's just been to one too many of these fucking parties, and he is done. He's going to find himself a ditch in northern India, and he is going to just have fun, you know. So for this moment. Okay, so I talked about how the Dragoons, they were a sort of middle heavy cavalry regiment, and so they got tanks, and they're off in Afghanistan, so they're having a fantastic time. And it was great. I'm like, that's fantastic, because you know what? The Dragoons were in Afghanistan in 2009, late over the winter and the spring, the time when presumably John was there and got shot. And I'm like, okay, so, you know, why is he wearing their tie and not the RAMC's tie? It's not a complete faux pas. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. An RAMC officer who found himself in a shitstorm and just really pulled it together and really showed what he was made of. It's not impossible that the regiment would be like, you know, here, have a tie.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So that's fine. And I'd say I love it as a regiment for him, because those guys are, you know, it's just, I have, you know. Bernard Montgomery is my real history crush.
Oh, okay.
Yes, if we cannot stay here alive, then let us stay here dead. My own particular favorite, I have seen the plan for victory with my own eyes, written on half a sheet of notepaper. These are all real, I'm not making these up. It's on YouTube. Seriously, it's fantastic. or the other one, the speech to the factory workers. You make things, and I use things. Verbatim. They gave him a title, but they gave him a title in Egypt. Okay. Anyway, but then it's season 2, and I'd say season 1, I'm like, okay, I think he's meant to be RAMC. He's wearing the dragoon's tie, and and say personally, I'm like, the guy's a stone cold killer. He has killed before. And don't tell me like, oh, that's because he's a doctor. Do you think every ER doctor in this country could shoot someone and then go like, because if you do, your medical service is even worse than I thought it was. So I'm like, as far as I'm concerned, listen, this guy got a medical degree and he's, working in the ER department. He's like, this is really boring, no one's shooting at me. I'm going to join the army. And he becomes a combat officer. But I think what the writers intend me to understand is he's in the RAMC and they gave him a tie. And he's a stone cold killer or something, I don't know. But then it's season 2 and suddenly all anyone wants to talk about is John's regiment. So apparently it's the 5th Northumberland Fusiliers. Okay, there's a couple of problems with that, but we'll get to them in a minute. But Harry the Equerry is one of my favourite people in this show because he uses the phrase John Watson of the 5th Northumberland Fusiliers. An RAMC medical officer is not of any regiment except the RAMC. He is with a regiment, okay? So he is an RAMC officer with the Northumberland Fusiliers, except apparently he's of the Fusiliers. Like, he's in the regiment. He can't be in the regiment if his job is primarily medical. Because, as I say, because then the other side are going to be like, you're just slapping red crosses on anything. It doesn't work like that. I mean, they kind of did that anyway, but, whatever. And obviously, I mean, I'm not completely deluded. As I say, my real life, what is the explanation for all of this? If I can get us, I'm just slinging stuff at the wall, just the way I write. But it's a fun wank for those who know the terminology, like where you can kind of massage the problem that's on the screen and make it be, this is explaining something about it. But obviously, I mean, really, it's just a case that they don't know the difference in the significance of saying someone's of the Fusiliers versus with the Fusiliers. But, as I say, my riposte to this is, well, one would certainly hope that Harry, of all people, would know the difference. A, he is in Buckingham Palace, and B, he is himself wearing a regimental tie of the Queen's own Hussars. And the Hussars are one of the most prestigious regiments in the British Army, not least because it was Winston Churchill's regiment when he was a young man. I know. Did he escape the Boers by standing on top of a train while it was moving? I think that's fantastic. Like young Indiana Jones, that's just Winston Churchill, basically. All right, so anyway, the problem with the 5th Northumberland Fusiliers, as John's regiment, is that they have ceased to exist. You're back to this regimental amalgamation thing. So basically, prior to 1751, a regiment had the name of the guy who was running the regiment. Well, listen, he paid for it, essentially. And if the colonel wasn't actually paying the bills, the colonel was some guy that the guy who was paying the bills really liked. Here, I'll buy you a regiment. And so it goes through a number of iterations, but at the time when Watson was attached to the Fusiliers, that was the Northumberland Fusiliers, and then in 1935, it didn't actually change the regiment. It was the King's birthday, and they're like hobbits. They give other people presents on their birthday. It's like, here, you can put royal in front of your name. Slightly more than that. But in 1968, four different Fusilier regiments got amalgamated into the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers today. And once again, like many, as I said, they were kind of mounted infantry. And so the sort of equivalent of that is between the wars, they became a light armoured division. Very light armoured division. Today, they have a light armoured division and an infantry. They've got a light armour battalion and a battalion of foot soldiers. And they are having, once again, the most fun. I need therapy about my attitude to war. Both of these pictures, I love these two bottom ones. The other thing is, were they in Afghanistan at the right time? Two of those fuckers have been there for 13 years. They come home for breaks and then they all go back again. Sometimes it's one battalion there and not the other, but seriously, I mean, these guys are. So could John have been there with the Fusiliers, time to run through every character in fiction could have served the Fusiliers. And so I'd say they're an armoured division. They've got I keep saying division when I mean battalion. They've got an armoured battalion, they've got an infantry battalion. I love the two pictures at the bottom. The Chinook helicopter is not protecting the tank. The tank is protecting the Chinook helicopter. It is trying to clear an area where the Chinook can come down. Helicopters are awesome, except they're really easy to hit with an RPG, especially when they're on the ground. So that's, you know, what do the Fusiliers do? Remember their old job, protect the guns, also stop the guns getting stolen. The Fusiliers' job today, protect the choppers, protect the heavy armor, protect anything that is slow moving, you know? Okay, so, and once again, bottom one, these guys are not getting off this helicopter. These guys are not waiting to get on this helicopter. These guys are trying to suppress fire so that they can get the chopper down, presumably to get wounded out. They've gotten themselves stuck in a fire line, okay? So that's the Fusiliers. They don't have horses, they've got some light armor, and their job is to protect the big expensive stuff, like cavalry officers. Okay? They got a hat. Remember they got a hat in Satan? Remember they got a hat in whatever it was, 17, whatever it was. They got that white feather. Well, one of the kings decided, I really like those white feathers, put them on all the infantry regiments. But there is a very important principle in regimental amalgamation. No regiment loses an honour. If you have been granted some kind of honour, which is then laid general, you will get an honour to put on top of your honour. And what did they get? They got the infantry regiments, and the funny thing is the hackles kind of went out with a bunch of the infantry regiments, but the Fusiliers are like, no, we're keeping the special hat. They got a two-tone hackle, this feather thingy, like a duster. And they got the red over white, and they were the only regiment, the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers is the only one who's got that hat, right? And while we're at it, I can actually get to the end of this now. There's two, as far as I'm concerned, there's actually two interesting little things attached to this picture. One is retroactive engineering of legends. Remember I said the Fusiliers got the white plume because they took them off the dead French officers' hats, or possibly just hats they captured. I suppose the guy didn't have to be dead. You can look this up in a million places now, and the story is that they took the white feathers they were wearing on their hats and dipped them in the blood of the fallen French. So you've got a legend that it only arises after this thing has already, do you know what I mean? Yeah. Why do the Fusiliers have a red and white hackle? Because of, and that legend has nothing to do, like, it wasn't even red. So that legend clearly can't be the right legend, okay? The other thing that I'm going to dilate on is the fact that this is something that's very different, once again, between the British and American services. Ex-American military, they got to keep their dog tags for a start. And they're, let's be honest here, they're positively a fetish object, certainly in our fandom. That is not true of British soldiers at all. The dog tags have about as much significance, provided you don't die. If you die, they send the tags to your family, so now they've got significance. But suppose you come home in A1 shape, they are no more significant to you than your belt. Do you know what I mean? It's just part of the equipage. It doesn't have the same thing to it. The other thing is that the British Army, basically, for an ex-British soldier to wear his uniform for anything except the private entertainment of his spouse is pretty much like wearing your wedding dress to your ex-husband's next wedding. No, you just don't. You do not. It is the most heinous. I mean, it's not even like, if you ask a British soldier this, he's like, I don't understand the question. Like, I can't even begin to comprehend. Apart from anything else, I don't have my uniform. But as I say, so that's once again, I see various things. I've got a question.
Then why does Meter still wear his uniform?
Because the writers don't care. It's the same reason. And as I say, and once again, I just want to reiterate, if you want to write something where John Watson is walking down Baker Street in his mess dress at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, go for it. As I say, don't let this get in the way. I just want you, you know, the more information you have, the more information you can ignore as you work, okay? So as I say, they don't wear their uniforms. And they do not, basically the only thing they're allowed to wear is the decorations or a regimental badge, unless you can wear your head covering, which is the technical term for hat, if the hat is what is called a special grace. So commandos, they get a green beret. They can wear that green beret, okay? Because it's not the standard beret. It has a particular, and the regiments who have a particular hat decoration are allowed to wear the decoration because that's the grace. But seriously, how are you going to attach that thing to your head without an army beret? So they get to wear the beret. So the one on the right, these are ex-fusiliers who still have the right to wear a beret with its badge and its hackle. And they will wear that. The other thing is they only wear that on military occasions, something where their military status is the reason that they are there, okay? So to say, that's something that's very different. Because you guys are like, listen, I paid for the uniform, I'm going to get the use of it. Okay, so that's the Fusilier's great hat, okay? Okay. Personally, I think Sherlock is looking off frame because he's like, I can't watch this. All right, 5th Northumberland Fusiliers. Doesn't exist anymore, but whatever. Presumably he means the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers. But whatever, and he's showing his ID. All right, what have I got? Here is one I made earlier. This, it's on my Tumblr, people. I'm so heartbroken. Not a single person bothered printing it and laminating it for this gig.
Next year.
This is John's identity card. You will notice it does not mention his regiment at all, okay? So you can imagine the degree to which some corporal or whatever on security, and you're like, I'm in the SAS, you know, I'm a Navy SEAL. Oh, I shouldn't have said that one. But whatever, you see, like, I'm in the medical corps, I'm in the armored corps, I'm in the flying corps, you know, this is the same card. So you can clearly the guy on the gate's going to be like, you know? It does have a readable strip on the back, so when they swipe it, they're like, you are not a commando. You are a vet. There's a difference, you know? Can I just go Royal Army Veterinary Corps, cavalry regiments with horses. There are places in Afghanistan you cannot get a wheeled or tracked vehicle. You can go there by a helicopter, but not in the summer because the air gets so thin, the choppers just fall out of the sky. If you go on your feet or on a horse. So there are vets in some of the most hellish spots in Afghanistan looking after horses. Isn't that awesome? Okay, anyway, so this is John's ID card, right, that he's flashing, which, you know, first of all, okay, fine, so it's saying I'm in the Fusiliers or whatever, it's meaningless. The corporal's going to be like, you can't tell that from the card. The really interesting thing, I think, though, and you're all like, I too. I'm like, John is holding something which is portrait orientation, has a picture at the top, and a readable barred block down here, okay? That is not what a British Army ID card looks like. It is also not what a British driver's license looks like, or a British social security. The British government, basically, unlike Americans, because you guys are all, we're independent, we can have portrait orientation or landscape orientation. The British government are like, no. If it is an officially issued ID, it is landscape orientation, the issuing authority at the top in the middle, your picture on the right, and your information on the left. So what do you have in your hand, John? Well, one of the possibilities is that it's a US Army ID card. In other words, Mary's not the only one who's working for the CIA. All right. The other thing is when I have nothing else to do with my time, I like to think about the drill sergeant who had to teach John Watson to salute. Because they're sergeants and he's a captain, so they have to call him sir. You are going to put your pluck an eye out, sir. Your hand is not to rest your forehead on, sir. That salute was terrible, terrible. Also, don't start me on the fact that okay, right. As my mother used to say, if you're going to do that, put a hat on. All right, but as I say, whatever, it's fine. Are we on season 3? Oh, yeah, no, we're okay. Captain John Watson, 5th Northumberland Fusiliers, retired, it says here. No, it doesn't. The Ministry of Defence, as I say, same thing. When you get out of the army, they want the tags back. The other thing they want back is your MOD 90 ID, okay? They do not give you a new one that says retired, and you don't get to keep the other one. So that's the whole thing anyway. Whatever ID it is he's flashing, he's not supposed to have it anymore. So I say the British Army does not issue, you are, you know, yes, you are a tremendous hero who is now retired. There is a veteran's ID card. It's the kind of thing where it lets you get discounts at supermarkets. Seriously. And there is a blazing row about it because they're not issued by the government at all. They're issued by a private organisation. So of course people are, I'm going to get me one of these that says Arthur Wellesley on it. Like seriously, they're trying to make sure that you're a legitimate veteran, but it's not working out that well, okay? So if it says retired, it's like, what do you want, John? 10% off on this thing? And once again, as I say, that's, as I say, just comparing. And once again, the orientation of the thing is very clearly portrait. You can see picture, bar. You can even sort of see, I think that on the first one they didn't bother faking the holograph patch, but they kind of made an attempt here. So he's like, yes, it says retired American Army. And, yeah, so, all right. This one. I'm John Watson, 5th Northumberland Fusiliers. At this point, I'm like, just John, whatever you say. Whatever you say, honey. And then this sod turns up. Refreshing, because I mean, you guys know I'm like this about Irene and like this about Sebastian, because like, well, okay, Sebastian Warren's clearly, he's not a good guy, let's put it like that. But Irene, I always get really irate, because like, she's perfectly nice, and she gets turned into a villain. I am equally exercised about the fact that Sholto, who was willing to profit from murder and theft by soldiers of the British Army, has suddenly turned into John's but anyway, it's fine because I think the actor's actually quite attractive. So there's a couple, you know, and so the first thing is like, why are you wearing that uniform? I mean, you know the way here you see guys who are going out on deployment and when they're still on the civilian leg of the trip, they're in their camouflage. That doesn't happen in Britain. Yeah, well, I'm taking a civilian plane to where often I'll wear jeans. You know, seriously, it's only when they're actually congregated as a battalion or whatever and are moving as a battalion that they actually put all the gear on, okay? The Army, you know, whatever. Basically, if the Army's flying the plane, wear your uniform. If the Army's not flying the plane, do not wear your uniform, okay? So, which is sad, actually, because it's way rarer to see guys in, like, camo or whatever in the British Isles, because I'm not wearing that out of the house. Whereas around here, they're just wandering around on the hoof, okay? So the first thing is like Sholto walks in and I'm like, but at this point I'm barely watching this show anyway, so it's fine, he's wearing the uniform. Why is he wearing the uniform? I have no earthly idea.
He had stabbed himself with something.
You could have worn a whalebone corset and gotten the same effect. So anyway, fine, it's Sholto. It's apparently John's old commanding officer. John, do you even have a medal? Yeah, sorry, got one down there. Oh, okay. Yeah, we're talking, don't worry, we're talking about that. So I'm just kind of like, so this is his commanding officer. Okay, I can scrunch my eyes up like this and I can kind of imagine, once again, in the same way, why is he wearing the dragoon's tie? Why is this guy, because this major is, I don't know. This major is leading a combat unit that weirdly has a captain-ranking medical officer who shouldn't really be outside the hospital, who's in tow with them and it all, I don't know. So to say, but anyway, he's wearing the uniform, that's nice, and I mean, it would be nicer if it was like a Fusiliers uniform, but that's okay. They have got one thing right. In fact, they've got the thing that the BBC almost always get right, which is the Fusilier cap badge. When the 4 regiments were amalgamated together to make one regiment, and you have the principle of you can't lose regimental history or honours, so the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers inherited the cap badge of the Northumberlands, the one that has Georgian the Dragon in the middle of the crest instead of the monarch's initials. Why? Because the Fusiliers are so old and so freaking famous, they get to have George as the emblem. They don't have to get re-stamped every time there's a new king, okay? So they've got the Northumberland's cap badges. That's nice. For reasons that completely escape me, he is wearing it on a beret that came from the Army of the Irish Republic. So there's a backstory there. Yeah. But you know what? That's the Irish all over for you. You're like, oh yeah, I'm an English major, you know, and John Watson, you're very attractive. I will now be your commanding officer. Try it on. And he's wearing the same thing on the collar and the buttons. So that's the Northumberland's, the inheritance from Canon Watson's brief regiment is in the cap badge of the modern Fusiliers. That's it, sorry. Unfortunately, they, the fact that, this business of the cap badge, they have, they've taken this as the crest for the regiment which they got from the London Fusiliers, the Royal Fusiliers. It was a time when a royal regiment was either one particularly favoured by the monarch or one that lived in London, where the king lives. So they got the emblem from the London Fusiliers. I'm sort of sad. Oh, hang on. I'm kind of sad because they got the emblem, they got the motto, which is the shame to him who thinks it shameful, whereas the Northumberland's motto had been where fate leads me, which I kind of liked, you know, or sometimes it's translated as a fate's call. So I like that. And they got from the Warwickshires the habit of having an Indian blackhorn antelope called Bobby as the mascot. If you've ever been to Warwickshire, you're like, listen, they're lucky to have it. I've never seen so much grass in my life. So that's it, yeah, and I think given the way Sholto is looking at that antelope, this is probably a really good place to stop, okay? If you guys are okay, I will do questions till 2, and then we have got to stop, okay?